My name is Gilly Flower, and this is not the life I imagined for myself. For 18 years, I poured every ounce of my heart into raising my adopted daughter, braiding her hair for school, staying up all night helping with homework, comforting her through heartbreaks. It wasn't for glory or recognition, just love. But the love I gave wasn't enough. One day, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You've hit a rough patch financially. Maybe it's time I focus on my own future and stop being tied to your struggles." And just like that, everything I had poured into her life was cast aside. There was no gratitude, no acknowledgement of the sacrifices I had made, just a swift dismissal, leaving my pride battered and my heart shattered. I watched her walk out the door, taking years of memories and trust with her. A fresh start, I thought. Distance, I hoped, would bring healing. But peace was fleeting. The call came 3 days later. My lawyer's voice poured through the receiver like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Kate, the inheritance case has been resolved. Congratulations, you're now worth $8 million. $8 million. My sacrifices weren't in vain, they had planted the seeds of my new life. Something was about to change. No more blind devotion, no more unspoken heartbreak. This story was getting a rewrite. Drop your city below, we want to see how far this story has reached. I'm the kind of woman who sees beauty in the smallest things, the way sunlight dances across a kitchen counter, the soft rustle of pages in an old book, or the vibrant colors of wildflowers blooming in the garden. Those little moments of joy have kept me grounded through life's storms, reminding me that even in the darkest times, there's still light to be found. I've always been someone who gives with her whole heart. Whether it was raising my adopted daughter, tending to friendships, or creating a warm and welcoming home, I poured myself into every connection and responsibility. But as the years went by, I learned the value of boundaries, the importance of holding on to my sense of self, even in the face of heartbreak or betrayal. Now, I live by the belief that strength doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes, it's quietly standing your ground and knowing you're worth more than what others give you. Lena's grin was radiant as she held up her phone, her voice as cheerful as a child showing off their latest drawing. "I picked this one for you. Well, for me, really." She laughed lightly, as if the audacious suggestion was completely reasonable. My smile faltered as I glanced at the screen. The villa was stunning, sure, but the price tag made my stomach knot. This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have tonight, but it had been looming ever since I noticed the shift in Lena's attitude, sharp edge that seemed to grow with each gift, each luxury she started expecting as her due. "Lena," I began gently, "that's a very extravagant choice. Right now, things are complicated financially." Her smile disappeared in an instant, replaced by a cold, hard look I barely recognized. "Complicated?" she snapped, cutting me off. "What's complicated about it? You have money, don't you? Or do you not anymore?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "My assets are temporarily frozen due to a legal issue with the company, but it's nothing permanent. Everything will be sorted out in just a few days." But before I could finish, she slammed the glass she was holding onto the marble countertop, shards scattering across the floor. "Do you think I'm stupid? You're just broke, aren't you? All those years of showing off, acting like you were untouchable. This serves you right." Her words stung more than I could have imagined. "Lena, that's enough," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay composed. But she wasn't finished. With a mocking laugh, she pulled a crisp document from her bag and slammed it onto the counter. "Here," she said, her tone laced with venom. "A termination of adoption agreement. Let's make this easy for both of us, shall we? I don't want to be tied to a broke, useless parent." I stared at the document, my hands shaking. The words blurred, but the meaning was crystal clear. "You prepared this?" I asked quietly, disbelief coloring my tone. "Of course I did," she shot back, crossing her arms. "I saw this coming. You can't even afford to give me what I deserve, so why should I stick around?" My heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of her words. I had given this girl everything, my love, my home, my trust. And now, she stood before me, tearing it all apart as though it meant nothing. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "If that's how you feel, then sign it," I said, my voice low but steady. "But remember this moment, Lena. Remember what you're walking away from." The coldness in her eyes didn't waver as she grabbed a pen, scribbled her signature, and shoved the papers toward me. Then, with a final glare, she turned on her heel and stormed out the door, leaving shards of glass and years of memories shattered in her wake. I sank into the nearest chair, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. For years, I had called her my daughter, had built a life around the love I thought we shared. But now, that life felt like an illusion, one that had crumbled the moment money stopped being part of the equation. The house felt unbearably silent after she left. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of cleaning up, preparing meals I couldn't eat, and trying to make sense of what had happened. The memories of our happier moments replayed in my mind like a cruel film, reel the way she first called me Mom, the laughter we used to share, the bond I thought was unbreakable. But on the third day, everything changed. My phone buzzed late in the afternoon. It was my lawyer. "Gilly," he said, his voice calm but filled with a hint of excitement. "The case has been resolved, and your assets are officially unfrozen. I've already taken care of all the necessary paperwork. Everything is back in your name." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me like a tidal wave. Finally, after weeks of uncertainty and stress, the nightmare was over. My fortune, what I had spent years building, was mine again. But the relief was quickly followed by a newfound determination. This wasn't just about regaining my financial stability. It was about regaining control of my life, about setting boundaries and refusing to let people like Lena take advantage of me ever again. Later that evening, as I stood on the porch of my home, looking out at the setting sun, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't known in years. Lena had walked away, believing there was nothing left for her here. But she had underestimated my strength, my resilience, and my ability to rebuild from the ground up. She would learn, soon enough, that I wasn't the broken woman she thought she had left behind. The room, once filled with tense silence, now felt suffocating under Lena's glare. Her lips curled in disgust, and her tone dripped with venom as she spat. "You make me sick. Sitting here, sipping coffee, pretending to be someone important when you're broke. How pathetic." I sat there, unmoving, the chill in her words sinking deep into my skin. This wasn't the girl I had raised, nurtured, fought for. This was someone I barely recognized, someone who had weaponized the title of daughter to wring every ounce of value from me until there was nothing left. "Lena," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging in my chest. "You've made it very clear how you see me. Let's stop pretending there's anything left to salvage here." Her eyes narrowed, her posture rigid. "You're just saying that because you don't want to admit you've failed. You can't take care of me, can you? You were supposed to give me everything, a better life, the best of everything, and now look at you. You're worthless." I stood slowly, the sound of shattered porcelain crunching beneath my shoes as I took a step toward her. "Worthless?" I repeated, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "No, Lena. What's worthless is the way you've treated me, the way you've betrayed everything I've done for you." She flinched, her bravado faltering for the briefest moment, but it didn't stop her. "You think you're better than me just because you've got a fancy house and money in the bank. But guess what? You don't even have that anymore." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You're right. I don't have the house, the car, or the bank account, not right now. But what I do have is self-respect, Lena, and I won't let you take that from me." Her face twisted with rage, and she turned to storm out of the room. But before she could reach the door, I called out, my voice steady and unyielding. "When you walk out of here, don't expect to come back. You've made your choice. Now live with it." The door slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the room like a final goodbye. I stood there for a moment, staring at the mess she'd left behind, shattered porcelain, bitter words, and years of memories turned to ash. And then, I started cleaning up. It wasn't just the physical mess I was tidying, it was the remnants of a relationship that had been frayed for far too long. As I swept up the shards, I felt something shift within me. Anger gave way to clarity, and clarity gave way to resolve. Lena had walked away, believing she'd taken everything from me. But she was wrong. She hadn't taken my strength, my dignity, or my ability to rebuild. 2 days later, as I stood on the porch of my home, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the driveway, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. "Gilly," he said, his tone calm but tinged with excitement. "The case has been resolved. The court has lifted the freeze on your assets. Everything is back in your name." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me like a wave. Finally, after weeks of uncertainty, the nightmare was over. But this wasn't just about regaining my financial stability, it was about reclaiming my life. Lena had shown me her true colors, and now I was ready to move forward without her. Later that afternoon, as I sat on the porch sipping coffee, the same spot where Lena had sneered at me just days ago, a car pulled into the driveway. I recognized it immediately, her father's Bentley, the one she had so generously gifted him without my consent. The door swung open, and Lena stepped out, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. She walked toward me slowly, her voice soft but strained. "Mom, can we talk?" I didn't move, didn't respond. I simply stared at her, waiting for whatever excuses she had prepared. I'm sorry," she began hesitantly, her voice trembling. "I was angry. I didn't mean the things I said. Please, let me come back. We can fix this." I tilted my head slightly, studying her face for any sign of sincerity. But all I saw was desperation, not for our bond, but for what she thought she could gain from me now that my fortune had returned. "You want to come back now that the money's back?" I asked, my tone calm but cutting. "How convenient." Her eyes widened, tears pooling as she shook her head. "It's not about the money, Mom. It's about us. I made a mistake. I realize now how much you've done for me. Please don't shut me out." I set my coffee down and stood, my gaze steady and unwavering. "You shut me out the moment you signed that termination agreement, Lena. You made your choice. Now you'll have to live with it." Her face crumpled as she reached for my arm, but I stepped back, the distance between us symbolic of everything that had changed. "I loved you, Lena. I gave you everything. But love isn't supposed to be a transaction, and I won't let you use me anymore." She left that afternoon, her sobs fading as the Bentley disappeared down the driveway. I watched her go, a strange mix of sadness and relief settling over me. For years, I had called her my daughter, had built a life around the love I thought we shared. But now, I was free to rebuild, to move forward, to focus on what truly mattered. Rick's bold smirk faltered at my words, and for the first time, he hesitated, glancing nervously at Lena. She stood there, arms crossed, tapping her foot in annoyance. "Finally," she muttered, her voice laced with impatience. "Do you know how long we've been waiting? You could have had the decency to show up on time." I raised an eyebrow, ignoring Rick and focusing solely on her. "Lena," I said, my tone calm but sharp, "I told you I'd be here. You didn't need to wait that long, but then again, patience was never your strong suit, was it?" Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she recovered quickly, rolling her eyes. "Whatever, let's just get this over with. I've got other things to do today." I walked past her without a word, heading straight for the courthouse doors. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step purposeful, deliberate. Behind me, I could hear Rick muttering something to Lena, but I didn't care enough to listen. Today wasn't about Thamit, it was about me. It was about taking back control. Inside the courthouse, Lena hurried to catch up with me, her expression twisting into one of forced politeness. "Mom, you're not going to make this difficult, are you?" she asked, her voice sugary, sweet but dripping with condescension. "I mean, it's like there's much left to fight over." I stopped in my tracks, turning to face her. My gaze was cold, unyielding. "Lena, you seem to be under the impression that I'm here to appease you. Let me make something clear. I'm here for closure, not for you." She blinked, momentarily caught off guard by my tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "It means," I said, stepping closer, "that this is the last time you'll use me as a stepping stone. From this moment forward, you're on your own." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Rick, sensing the tension, stepped between us with a smirk that only fueled my irritation. All right, ladies. No need to get dramatic. Let's just sign the papers and move on, yeah?" I ignored him, brushing past both of them as I entered the hearing room. The judge was already seated when we arrived, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As we all sat down, Lena's demeanor shifted, her smug confidence melted into something more subdued, almost nervous. She glanced at Rick, who gave her an encouraging nod, and then back at me. The judge began the proceedings, her tone clipped and efficient. "This is a petition for the termination of adoption. Both parties are present?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied evenly. Lena's voice wavered slightly as she echoed, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's gaze landed on me, her brow furrowing. "Miss Flower, you've agreed to this termination. Is that correct?" I nodded, folding my hands in my lap. "That's correct, Your Honor." "And you understand the legal implications? That once this agreement is signed, there will be no familial or financial obligations between you and Miss Dawson?" I smiled faintly, my voice steady. "I understand completely, Your Honor." The judge shifted her attention to Lena. "Miss Dawson, do you have any final statements before we proceed?" Lena hesitated, glancing at Rick before plastering on a wide smile. "No, Your Honor. This is for the best for both of us." The judge gave a curt nod and began reviewing the documents. The room was silent, except for the faint rustling of papers. I could feel Lena's eyes on me, and for the first time, I didn't care. This was her choice. She wanted to cut ties? Fine. But she was about to learn that actions have consequences. When the judge handed me the document to sign, I took my time, reading every word before putting pen to paper. Lena tapped her foot impatiently, her frustration practically radiating off her. Once I finished, I slid the papers back toward the judge with a calm, deliberate movement. The judge took the papers, signed them with finality, and looked up at us. "This agreement is now legally binding. You are no longer mother and daughter in the eyes of the law." Lena let out a breath of relief, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Rick clapped her on the back, grinning like he'd won some sort of prize. "Well, that's that," he said, standing up. "Ready to head out, kiddo?" But before they could leave, I cleared my throat. "One more thing," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. Lena turned, her expression wary. "What now?" I stood, straightening my jacket. "I thought you should know. As of this morning, the court lifted the freeze on my assets. Everything I own is mine again." Her face went pale, and Rick's smirk vanished in an instant. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You heard me," I said, my tone calm but laced with satisfaction. "All those houses, cars, and accounts you thought were gone, they're not. And guess what? You have no claim to any of it. Not a cent." Lena stumbled back slightly, her hands trembling. But I thought—" "You thought wrong," I interrupted. "This was your choice, Lena. You wanted to sever ties, so here we are. Enjoy your new life." Rick tried to step forward, his expression hardening. "Listen here." I raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. You've done enough damage. The both of you have. Now get out of my sight." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her bed, and now she'd have to lie in it. As they left the courthouse, I stayed behind for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another chapter where I finally put myself first. Lena's face twisted with fury, her voice sharp and venomous. "You think this means you've won?" she spat, her words dripping with malice. "You're nothing without me. You'll regret this, I swear." I stood there, unmoved, my expression calm and resolute. "Regret?" I repeated softly, tilting my head. "Lena, the only regret I have is not seeing your true colors sooner." Her lips trembled, but the fire in her eyes didn't waver. She was cornered, and she knew it. But instead of backing down, she lashed out, her voice rising. "You think you're so high and mighty now, don't you? Just because you got your money back? Well, guess what? Money doesn't make you a good person. You're still just a bitter, lonely old woman." I let out a quiet laugh, the sound cold and sharp. "And yet, here you are, begging that bitter, lonely old woman to take you back. Funny how that works, isn't it?" Her face turned crimson, her fists clenching at her sides. Rick, who had been standing awkwardly to the side, finally stepped forward, his voice dripping with false charm. Now, let's not escalate things. Gilly, surely we can come to some sort of understanding. After all, we're all family here." I turned to him, my gaze icy. "Family?" I repeated, my tone cutting. "You're mistaken, Rick. Family is built on trust, respect, and love, none of which you or Lena have shown me. So no, we are not family." Rick's smirk faltered, and he took a step back, his confidence crumbling under the weight of my words. Lena, however, wasn't ready to give up. She stepped forward, her voice trembling with desperation. "Mom, please. I'll change, I swear. I'll do whatever you want, just don't cut me off like this." I looked at her, my heart heavy but resolute. "Lena, this isn't about punishment. It's about consequences. You made your choice when you signed that agreement. You wanted freedom, and now you have it. But freedom comes with responsibility, and it's time you learned that." Her tears returned, streaming down her face as she dropped to her knees again. "I was wrong," she sobbed. "I was so wrong. Please, give me another chance. I'll prove to you that I can be better." I shook my head slowly, my voice steady. "Lena, this isn't about proving anything to me. It's about proving it to yourself. And that's a journey you'll have to take on your own." She stared at me, her expression a mix of heartbreak and disbelief. For a moment, I thought she might lash out again, but instead, she simply stood, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Without another word, she turned and walked away, Rick trailing behind her. As they disappeared from view, my assistant stepped forward, his voice soft. "Miss Flower, are you all right?" I nodded, letting out a slow breath. "I'm fine," I said, though the weight of the moment still lingered. "Let's go. We have work to do." He opened the car door for me, and as I slid into the seat, I felt a strange sense of peace. This wasn't the ending I had hoped for, but it was the one I needed. Lena had made her choice, and now I was free to move forward without the burden of her betrayal. As the car pulled away, I glanced out the window, watching the city blur past. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. This was my life, and I was finally taking it back. Rick's grumbling faded as he retreated, his curses trailing off into the distance. I stood at the door, the weight of finality settling in my chest. 3 years unraveled into nothing more than hollow, scattered fragments. It wasn't anger I felt, it wasn't even sorrow. What filled me now was a calm clarity, an unshakable understanding that this chapter of my life had closed for good. I stepped back into my home, shutting the door behind me. The teapot on the table had long gone cold, but I lifted the cup anyway, savoring the quiet. A few hours later, as I sat by the window with a book in hand, my phone buzzed on the table. For a brief moment I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen. It was my assistant. "Miss Flower," his voice came through, measured as always. "I thought you might want to know Rick has been trying to reach out to multiple departments. He's asking for a meeting." I couldn't help but laugh softly, shaking my head. And of course, we've denied every request. I've already instructed security to blacklist him from entering any properties or offices associated with the company. He won't be bothering you again." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Good. Let him stew in his own mess. He's earned it." As I ended the call, I let out a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. This was freedom not just from Rick or Lena, but from the toxic cycle of giving and being taken for granted. For too long, I had let my kindness be exploited, my love mistaken for weakness. But no more. The following day, I visited the office for the first time since the asset freeze had lifted. My employees greeted me warmly, their relief and gratitude evident in their smiles. It was a stark contrast to the betrayal I had faced in my personal life, a reminder that loyalty and respect still existed, even if it hadn't come from the people I had called family. As I stepped into the conference room, my assistant handed me a folder. "Here's the updated financial report," he said. "And as you requested, we've initiated the legal process to recover the debts owed by Rick and Lena." I flipped through the documents, my expression calm but focused. "Good. Make sure every last cent is accounted for. And when it's done, I want a full report." He nodded, his professionalism unwavering. "Of course, Miss Flower." As the meeting progressed, I found myself immersed in work once again, the familiar rhythm of leadership grounding me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself strong, capable, and in control. But even amidst the flurry of spreadsheets and strategies, a part of me couldn't help but think of Lena. I had loved her once, deeply and without reservation. I had wanted so desperately to give her a better life, to show her what it meant to be part of a real family. Yet, in the end, she had chosen a path of greed and selfishness, a path that led her far away from me. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a warm, golden glow, I stood on my balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The events of the past week replayed in my mind, each moment sharpening my resolve. I had done everything I could for Lena. I had given her love, support, and opportunity. And when she threw it all away, I let her go. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to let someone walk away. The next morning, I received a call from Susan, my oldest and dearest friend. Her voice was warm, full of concern. "Gilly, how are you holding up?" I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "I'm fine, Susan, really. It's been a lot, but I think I'm finally ready to move on." She paused for a moment before replying. "Good. You deserve peace, Gilly. And if you ever need a reminder of how strong you are, just give me a call. I'll remind you." I laughed softly, the sound lighter than it had been in days. "Thank you, Susan. It's more than you know." As the days turned into weeks, life began to settle into a new normal. I threw myself into my work, rebuilding what had been lost and forging new paths for the company's future. But more importantly, I began to reclaim my own identity, no longer defined by the roles of mother or caretaker, but simply as Gilly Flower. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back at me wasn't broken or defeated. She was strong, resilient, and free. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled not for anyone else, but for myself. I held Lena's letter in my hand, her once flamboyant handwriting now stripped of its usual flair. Her words were raw, honest, as if each stroke of the pen had drawn a piece of herself. I wasn't someone who softened easily, but in that moment, I didn't feel anger or bitterness. For the first time, I felt an odd sense of closure. She had returned everything I once gave her, not just material possessions, but the weight of a connection she had severed herself. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Lena's regret wasn't my burden to carry anymore, but knowing she was finally facing the truth, that was enough for me. That evening, I called my assistant into the office. "I need you to handle something discreetly," I said, handing him a small note. "Use this to enroll Lena in a vocational retraining program. Focus on market analysis, that's where she showed promise before. But make sure she never finds out it's me funding it." He nodded, understanding without hesitation. "I'll take care of it, Miss Flower." I didn't need gratitude or recognition. What I wanted was to give her a chance to rebuild not as my daughter, but as someone who deserved to carve out her own path, whether she succeeded or not. A few days later, a friend convinced me to attend a charity dinner. It was the kind of event I used to avoid too many social games, too much small talk. But the atmosphere was warm and inviting, the hum of old jazz floating through the room like a soft embrace. For a moment, I forgot how much I used to resist these gatherings. I stood near the bar, a glass of champagne in hand, chatting idly with an acquaintance when a calm voice broke through the din beside me. "Gilly Flower, I've heard your name before." I turned to see a man, modestly dressed, his presence understated but grounded. His gaze carried a gentle curiosity, the kind that didn't pry but invited conversation. "I'm Samuel Pierce," he introduced himself. "I run the Community Health Fund. I heard about the work you've been doing reshaping your business direction. It's impressive." I smiled lightly, taking in his words. "Seems I've become a bit of a headline in certain circles." He chuckled softly, his sincerity shining through. "Headlines don't impress me much. You, however, sound like someone worth listening to." In that moment, I realized something profound. There's a kind of respect that isn't born from power or negotiation. It's the respect that comes from being seen, truly seen, simply for who you are. Samuel wasn't looking at me through the lens of wealth or status. He was meeting me as an equal. Life returned to normal faster than I had expected. I once believed that losing certain people would leave a permanent void, but the truth was far simpler. Life doesn't pause for heartbreak, it quietly stitches itself back together in the spaces left behind. The crisis at the company had passed, and I had been the one to lead us through it. With renewed clarity, I revived long-delayed projects, reconstructed the business framework, and steered us toward new horizons. Every morning I stood at the head of the conference room, breaking down strategies with precision and purpose. My colleagues no longer saw me merely as their leader, they saw me as their anchor, their symbol of resilience. Outside of work, I began to reclaim the pieces of my life I had long neglected. I planted the first sprig of lavender in my gardenia, nod to Lena's favorite scent once upon a time. On sunlit afternoons, I brewed oolong tea and sat in my wicker chair, watching the flowers sway gently in the breeze. Neighbors stopped by to chat, their warmth reminding me that community was a gift I had overlooked for too long. I picked up painting again, converting the upstairs storage room into a studio. My work wasn't anything remarkable, but it brought me peace, a quiet joy I hadn't felt in years. I even started planning a trip, the kind I'd always dreamed of. Maybe I'd see the snow in the Colorado mountains, or listen to the wind along San Francisco's coast. It wasn't about escaping, it was about leaving with intention, exploring the world with a heart open to possibility. Sometimes, Samuel would join me for dinner. There wasn't any sweeping romance between us, just thoughtful companionship and honest conversations. We talked about books, markets, family histories, and occasionally the quieter regrets we carried. "You seem steadier than most people I know," he said one evening, his tone contemplative. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle in. "It's been a long journey, Samuel, but I think I've finally found my balance." In the end, Lena's chapter in my life had closed, but it wasn't wasted. She had taught me lessons I couldn't have learned otherwise, lessons about trust, boundaries, and the power of letting go. And though her journey would now unfold far from mine, I hoped she would find her own strength, her own clarity, her own peace. As for me, I had finally come home to myself. I laughed gently, letting the sound melt into the quiet of the room. "It's not steadiness," I murmured to Samuel one evening over dinner. "It's learning not to cling so tightly anymore." The words felt like an unraveling a truth that had taken me years to fully grasp. There was no urgency to draw closer, no need to force a bond or seek validation. Some companionship, I finally understood, didn't need to be called love to be deeply comforting. We ate in a quiet rhythm, the kind of silence that didn't demand filling. Samuel didn't press for anything more, just nodded thoughtfully, his gentle smile reflecting an understanding I hadn't expected to find in someone else. I realized then how healing it was to sit across from someone who didn't see my strength as something to be conquered, or my vulnerabilities as flaws to be exploited. As for Lena, I never reached out to her again. There was no resentment left in me, only a quiet acceptance. Through a community project coordinator, I occasionally heard whispers of her progress show she was attending her vocational courses diligently, how her attendance record was impeccable, and how she'd even begun volunteering for the mentorship program. It made me think, as I often did in those rare, reflective moments, maybe she was starting to understand that true redemption doesn't come from others handing you a second chance. It comes when you choose to stand up for yourself and rebuild from the ground up. I didn't interfere with her new life, just as I hoped no one would interfere with mine. The moonlight spilled across my desk as I turned another page of the novel I'd been savoring for weeks. My fingers brushed the textured paper, and I paused to breathe in the quiet of the evening. This year, I had lost so much, and yet I had gained even more. Happiness, I had come to realize, didn't come from possessing someone or securing something. It wasn't tethered to fleeting victories or fragile connections. It came from no longer fearing what might be lost. Because once you find the courage to walk alone, you realize you already have everything you need. There's still so much I don't know about the future, but I know this much. I am strong enough and soft enough to meet every tomorrow as it comes. It was with this peace in mind that I poured another cup of tea, the fragrance filling the space around me. The world outside had quieted for the night, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to this calm, unbroken moment. But just as I raised the cup to my lips, the doorbell rang, a sharp, unexpected sound breaking the stillness. I froze, the porcelain trembling slightly in my hand. Outside, the porch light glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the pathway. As the doorbell echoed through the quiet house, a surge of emotions coursed through me. The peace I had been cradling, that fragile sense of equilibrium, trembled on the edge of breaking. My fingers lingered on the rim of the teacup, the warmth grounding me even as my thoughts raced. There was an unfamiliar weight in my chest, a mix of curiosity and caution. This moment, so unexpected, reminded me of how much I had endured, how much I had rebuilt. I wasn't afraid, but I felt the ache of the unknown pressing against the calm I had worked so hard to reclaim. As I moved toward the door, my steps were slow, deliberate. Each breath was steady, though my mind hummed with possibilities. The soft glow of the porch light framed the faint figure behind the frosted glass, leaving their identity shrouded in mystery. I paused, my hand hovering near the handle, torn between the instinct to protect my hard-won sanctuary and the pull of the unpredictable. This moment felt suspended in time, as if the universe had chosen now to test the boundaries of the strength I had discovered within myself.